Okay, this is lesson 105, Algebra 2, Advanced Factoring. There's that advanced word again. Alright, so when you have an answer, and I'm just going to kind of give you some free information here. X plus 3 times x plus 2. Okay, that equals, if you were to multiply all that out, x cubed plus 5x squared plus 6x. This is the original equation. That is the factored part of that. Alright, so let me explain something about these. The answer that you get when you factor, the number of x's in your answer or your factor will always be this number, which means you will have this many answers when you solve for x. Now remember, when you factored, you're trying to figure out what's going to make each one of these three 0. Well, what makes this 0? Well, 0 does. What makes this 0? A -3. And what makes this 0? A -2. A -2 plus 2 is 0. A -3 plus 3 is 0. So what that tells you then is that there are three numbers that if you plug any of those three in there, it will make a true statement. Alright, so one of the other things it does is, let's say that you decide to graph this equation. The line, okay, so let's say that we've got our graph. The graph of that will do something pretty crazy. It will go, let's say, something like that. Let's say that's the graph. What these answers tell you is where this graph crosses the x-axis. Crosses at 0, crosses at -2, and it crosses at -3. That's what these answers tell you, is where the graph crosses the x-axis, and that's it in all math. So when you're solving these problems, that's what you're finding out, where the where the line will cross the x-axis. Another name for that is these are not only the answers, they're also called the roots. The roots are where it crosses the x-axis. It's also called the x's. What are the x's? The x's are here, here, and here. Okay? So, different words for the answer, but that's really what you're doing there. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to factor some numbers that are a little bit different than what you're used to factoring. Alright, so we've got a number. Back in the olden days, we would have something like, well, let's take the x cubed plus 5x squared plus 6x. And if I were to ask you to factor that, you would look to see what was common in all three of those. So you'd factor out an x. Then you would look at this and say, okay, can I factor this into two binomials? Two numbers multiplied together give me 6, added together give me 5. And there's my factor. Okay, so you've done that before. Alright, what we're going to do with this section is, here it made it real easy because there was a 1 in front of there. So you didn't have to do anything weird. We're going to put a number in front of there now. So for instance, we might put a 6 here and ask you to factor that. That's going to be a little bit different. So that's what we're going to do in this lesson. And golly, it just seems like we've done this before, but the book is acting like you've never done it. So I guess I will assume that you've never done it, and we'll see what happens. If you have done it, it'll just be good review, because I haven't taught it to you. Alright, so there's your equation. You're going to put it in the right order, like we have there. And then you're going to take this number in front here times this number and its sign. So we're going to get -12, and we're going to put it over there. Alright, so now what I'm looking for, two numbers multiplied together give me -12, added together give me 1. Okay, so look at that a minute. Two numbers multiplied together to give you -12, added together give you whatever number is in front of the single variable, just the x there. Alright, we have got quite a few options there because we have negative 12 and 1, we have 12 and negative 1, we have 6 and 2, or negative 6 and 2, 6 and negative 2, 3 and negative 4, and negative 3 and 4. We've got all those different options. But you should be able to get it in your head pretty quick. Being able to find out two numbers multiplied together give you 12, and either add them or the difference between them is 1. So that tells me 3 and 4. Because I know 3 and 4, the difference is 1, multiply them together, and you get 12. But which one is which? Okay. This is a positive, so the biggest number is going to be a positive. So we're going to use this one right there because it's 3 and 4. And we know that the positive 4 plus a negative 3 is going to give us a positive 1. So again, come on, this sign here determines which of these two numbers you're going to use here. The sign here has to be the same sign as the biggest number. If this were a minus sign, we would use this one because the biggest number, 4, has a minus sign on it. But since it's a plus, the biggest number is a plus 4, so we're going to use that one. And what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite the equation, but instead of using a 1x, we're going to use these two numbers. So watch what happens here. And I'm going to put the, I usually try to put the negative number first if I can. Doesn't really matter, but it makes life easier. So notice, when we take these two and add them, we get our positive 1. Okay, so we didn't really change the value, we just kind of changed what it looked like. Alright, so once we get there, we're going to group. We're going to put parentheses around the first two, parentheses around the second two, but we're not going to put parentheses around the sign of the second group. Alright, so now let's just look at this. I can factor out a 3 and an x, and what do I have left? 2x minus 1. Okay, so I took out a 3x, and I was left with 2x. Took out a 3x here, and it didn't make it 0, it made it 1. Okay, there's always a placeholder there, so it's always going to be a 1. If you take the whole thing out, you have to have a 1. Okay, let's look at the next one. Can I take anything out of that one? Yes, I have a 2 that's common, so I'll take a 2 out, and I'm left with 2x minus, I took the whole 2 out, so I've got a 1. Alright, notice something here, and this will always be true. These two groups will be the exact same. They have to be, or you did something incorrectly. They will always be the same. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our numbers outside of the group and put them together. Put them in parentheses. And take our group here, just take one of them, and write it like that. That is factored of that. Okay? So we're going to have to do these a couple times for you to feel comfortable doing this. But that's what there is. I say that's all there is to it. It's not really hard. It's just a lot of steps. All right, let's do 105.2. We have 2x squared minus 7x minus 15. Alright, so again, first step. 2 times negative 15 is negative 30. I'm looking for two numbers multiplied together that give me negative 30, added together give me negative 7. So let's see what I've got. 30 and 1 give me 30, but there's no way I can get 7 with 30 and 1. 5 and 6, I can multiply those together and get 30, but 5 and 6 is 11, and 6 minus 5 is 1, so there's no way to get 7 there. 10 and 3. 10 and 3 give me 30, and the difference between those is 7. So 10 and 3 works, but which one's negative? Well, the negative sign there means the negative goes on the biggest number, and I put a positive there because I want to be able to multiply these together and get a negative 30. So one of them has to be negative and one of them has to be positive. Alright, so those are my two numbers. So I write it again with those two numbers, and again I put my 10 first, if I can. Okay, then I group, and then I factor. Okay, and notice that and that have to be the same. Now I put my numbers outside the parentheses together, parenthesis, and I take one of my groups there, and I'm done. Okay, so that goes pretty fast once you get the hang of it. All right, let's look at another one. This is example 105.3, and they're going to get a little trickier, but we want to start out pretty simple so that you kind of get the hang of the steps in order to solve these. Okay, we do not want a negative there. So if we don't want a negative there, we just change the sign of everything. Okay? And let's move these two over to be with that. In order to do that, we have to change the signs, because we have to subtract 5x here and here, and then we subtract 6 here and subtract 6 here. Okay, so we end up with that. Alright, so now we multiply that and that. Gives me negative 36. Two numbers multiplied together give me negative 36. Added or subtracted give me 5. Alright, so what are my options here? 12 and 3. No, 12 and 3 gives me 15, or 12 minus 3 gives me 9, doesn't give me negative 5. 18 and 2, that doesn't work. 9 and 4. 9 times 4 is 36, and the difference between 9 and 4 is 5. So my sign is negative, so the sign on my biggest number has to be negative. And I need a negative 36, so I have to have opposite signs there, like I do. And let's put these on here. And again, I put the negative on first. And you'll see why I put the negative on first later on. Okay, then I group. Then I group. So I take out a 3x, and I have a 2x left, minus 3. Plus, take out a 2, and I have an x minus 3. Then I have a 3x plus 2 and a 2x minus 3. Alright, so that is 100 and is this 105.3. Okay, so that's it for lesson 105. Now, when I was a kid, they did not give us this quick and easy way to do it. And it may not be quick, it may not be easy to you, but if you've done it the really, really hard way back in the olden days, you'd realize how nice it is to be able to do this. I mean, these problems would take hours and hours to do because they didn't give you these steps to do. You had to kind of invent this new way of doing it that was terrible. So being able to do this is kind of nice. Like in the last video when we were dividing polynomials, I said I'd teach you another way. Well, you'll never appreciate the newer way if you hadn't had to do the yucky way. So anyway, 14 minutes and we are done.